Alright, hey guys, Paxton, welcome back to yet another weekly meta report. The first weekly meta report for the Mega Rising meta. Very excited to see how the meta shifts as the weeks go by. If this is your first video on my channel, really do consider liking and subscribing. Really does help me out tremendously, especially as a small-time content creator. But without further ado, let's get right into this. So again, if this is your first weekly meta report on my channel, how this usually goes, I'm going to be looking at several top-performing decks from tournaments this week. And then towards the end of the video, I'm going to be using one of these decks in PvP to see how it performs. So yeah, we're going to be going over two tournaments. First one is the Pokémon tournament right here, as well as the Froggy X Weekly Cup, the most popular tournaments from this week. So yeah, also we're going to be using the website play.limitlesstcg.com. It's going to be in the description if you guys are curious, if you want to check out this website for yourself. So yeah, first tournament, Pocket Mads. We got a very interesting lineup right here. So as looking at the top 5, so number 1, of course, we got Mega Altaria, Jirachi, amazing combo. Second, Mega Absol, Darkrai Ex. If you guys are curious, I did make a deck showcase pairing these two cards together. It should be my last deck showcase on my channel, so check that out. Of course, Suicuine Greninja, a remnant from the previous meta, still kind of clinging on. We shall see how effective this pairing will be as the weeks go by. Mega Blaziken Ex, only getting to number 4. Interesting. Yeah, a lot of people had high expectations that this card would be like an insane broken pairing, but looking at this, I mean, it only got to number 4. Not doing as great as the other two Megas, Absol and Altaria. Interesting. And then on the 5th slot, nice, Hydreigon Absol combo. All right, first deck we're going to be looking at is the winner right here. So the winner is Narumi from Froggy X. Nice. This is a deck list right here. Interesting. So this deck has an insane early game presence because we have cards like Chingling, as well as Jirachi, Sableye, amazing just to kind of like one-shot Oricorio. This card can very much do that. Jirachi is pretty huge, especially if you're going against Mega Gyarados. So essentially able to one-shot Magikarp. So pretty unfortunate. This kind of makes it so that it's very hard for Gyarados to be somewhat viable. If anything, you are kind of forced to Giant Cape. But as you can see, Star Drop only requires 1 energy, and this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. In other words, yeah, just one-shotting Magikarp just like that. Insane value, and on top of that, one-shotting baby Pokemon as well. Jingling baby Pokemon, and very effective again towards early game. Jingly Noise does 10 damage. However, what makes this card insane is that during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. So insane disruption, especially in a meta where rare candies are very prominent. So let's say like Blaziken Ex, you can just delay your opponent from getting Blaziken Ex because of Chingling. Just like spamming this attack, making it so that your opponent can't use rare candy, at least for a couple of turns, until they can just take out this baby Pokemon. And of course, to tie everything together, Mega Altaria EX. Essentially a stage 1 version of Pikachu EX. If you guys remember Pikachu EX from Genetic Apex, very similar attack in my opinion. However, this card is far more consistent because you are doing a flat damage, whereas Pikachu EX is a multiplier. So you could do 0 damage potentially. Very unlikely, especially with that whole meta archetype. But same thing with this as well. So Mega Altaria, 190 HP, stage 1 of course. Mega Harmony requires 2 Psychic Energy, 40 base damage, and this attack does 30 more damage for each of your bench Pokemon. In other words, max damage if your whole bench is filled, you're doing 130. Just flat damage. And if you want, you can pair red, 150, and a type advantage, 170. This card is getting a lot of value towards the mid to late game. Yeah, so ideally for the strat right here is to, early game, this kind of mess up your opponent with either Jirachi, Chingling, or even Sableye. But again, Sableye is primarily just kind of dealt with to counteract Oricorio. Then towards the mid game to sub in Mega Altaria and sweet. Looking at the trainer cards, this deck is very disruptive. As you can see, we got 1 Mars and then 2 red cards. So you're making your opponent's like this life a living nightmare, essentially making it so it's harder for them to get the cards they need, whether it's a rare candy or a Pokemon, or even trainer cards, especially later on in the game. Like Mars towards the late game can definitely help you out tremendously. So ideally you would kind of red card towards the middle to late game and then kind of save Mars towards the late game, and that can be very much your win condition. I've won a lot of battles because of Mars, making it so my opponent cannot get like a Lily or a Cyrus that they can very much just use and just win the game. Yeah, very satisfying. And on top of that, we also have Lucia, rather new card. Put 2 random basic Pokemon with 50 HP or less from your deck into your hand. Yeah, so getting potentially a lot of value because looking at this deck, a majority of your basics are below 30 or at least at 50 HP. So yeah, benefiting from Lucia. The only thing that's really not benefiting is of course Sableye. But again, depending on your matchup, you're most likely not even going to be using this gem Pokemon, whatever this type of Pokemon this is. Yep, Sableye. More so again, just leading with Chingling or Jirachi and eventually subbing into Mega Altaria. And we also have Sabrina, Cyrus, amazing. If you want, you can very much replace Sabrina with Repel, but it really depends on the meta. It really depends how prominent basic cards, like basic Pokemon, are in general. Just keep in mind, Repel only works against basic cards, so yeah, keep that in mind. Cyrus as well. Copycat, Again, pretty good just to generate cards, especially if your opponent's using cards such as Suicuine Ex or even Sylveon EX to just generate a bunch of cards. And on top of that, you could just copycat, and then during the same turn after copycatting, you can just red card. So you're getting a lot of value and just shutting them down completely. So yeah, overall, a very fun deck. This is, yeah, very annoying. I feel like there's a lot of decks in this meta that are like very annoying, but nevertheless, very diverse. I feel like there's no set card. Like this isn't like the previous meta where like Suicune, Greninja, like sure there are other decks that are super viable and prominent, but Suicune Greninja just dominated the meta. Very hard to deal with depending on the scenario. And yeah, I mean, looking at other metas, the Silvally meta, same thing. Like literally every game was against a Silvally. Whereas in this meta, looking at it, it looks rather promising because we got this Mega Altaria, we got Blaziken just trying to struggle, trying to do good, trying to compete, as well as of course Absol. So yeah, this feels very diverse, which is very much appreciated. And then looking at the matches, so this person only lost once against a Blaziken deck. Kind of makes sense because for Blaziken EX, depending on your RNG, you can just start attacking your second turn. And yeah, I'm assuming in this matchup, it was just kind of down to RNG, if anything, because if you can just start disrupting your opponent early on in the game, especially against especially with this pairing, Blaziken and Entei, then your opponent really can't compete, which is, I feel like what happened in that 6th battle right here. Same deck. So this is the deck that the player lost to, and this is the deck that the player won against. Yeah, very similar. So from the looks of it, I mean, it probably just came down to RNG. Basically, your starting hand, because again, Blaziken, Mega Blaziken, if you just get a very goated starting hand, then your opponent can't do anything. But regardless, rather consistent nevertheless. Like, yeah, this guy went against multiple Blazikens, yeah, and still came out on top. So kind of shows how prominent this deck really is. And speaking of Mega Blaziken, this is number 2 for this tournament right here. We got the, yeah, Mega Blaziken Entei combo. And then looking at the deck, yeah, a lot of fun. I feel like a lot of people looking at tournaments, they expected Blaziken to perform a lot better. However, that's not the case, of course, but it's still pretty good. Like, sure, it's not as great as people make it out to be, but it's still very fun to play and so rewarding to use. So yeah, this is the deck right here. As you can see, you kind of want to lead with Entei, in my opinion. Lead with Entei, just do chip damage, chipping your opponent's Pokemon, and eventually sub into Mega Blaziken eventually. And this is pretty nice, especially with the addition of Flame Patch, an item. If you guys don't know, attach a fire energy from discard pile to your active fire Pokemon. In other words, it's very hard to explain, but there is a combo making it extremely easy for Mega Blaziken EX to get built. So yeah, ideally you want to lead with Entei, and then in a couple of turns, just sub in Mega Blaziken. And there's going to be some scenarios where you would retreat with Entei, and then Flame Patch, because keep in mind, after retreating, you discard 2 fire energy. With that being said, you can just Flame Patch and then just fully build Blaziken just like that. And on top of that, I mean, you could either sub out of Entei or have your opponent knock out Entei, then Mars, and just bully your opponent with Blaziken. Because after, and of course, Lily's right here just to help you out just with sustainability. Got Sabrina, Cyrus as well, just in case your opponent tries to kind of like retreat, try to pull a fast one on you. We got that. Rocky Helmet as well, which is pretty good, especially when dealing with Oricorio, just to do a little bit extra damage. So yeah, with Blaziken, after attacking, you're doing 140. With Rocky Helmet, you're doing 160. So yeah, a lot of potential. I made a deck showcase if you guys want to check it out. It's a very similar deck to this. I feel like the only main difference is I think the Sabrina as well as the X-Speed. In my deck, I ran 2 Lilies, which could help you out with sustainability yet again. Yeah, depending on your opponent's cards, they really can't compete against Mega Blaziken. But overall, a lot of fun. I feel like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, again, are saying that it's not that as great. But just because it's not as great as people expect it to be doesn't mean it's that bad. Like, it's not as broken, which is good. Because, I mean, I very much prefer, like, a very non-broken card. Because making this card not as broken, this adds to diversity. Because if it was huge, if it was like just meta changing, like yeah, just like as it is, then we're gonna see a Suicuine Greninja meta yet again. Just like a bunch of Blaziken. But no, instead we got a lot of diversity, which is very much appreciated. So looking at the battles right here, okay, so matches, of course, lost to number 1, yeah, Narumi. But aside from that, got 2 losses. Lost to Hydreigon Pichu. Interesting. Very interesting matchup. Let's just take a quick look. Got to 8th place, pretty unfortunate, but looking at this deck, just a quick glimpse. Interesting. Okay, yeah, just leading with Hydreigon. Overall, a very nice non-EX deck. It's been a while since we actually saw like a fully this goated non-EX deck. The last one was Sylveon, from what I remember. Like, that's actually somewhat viable, like S tier. But yeah, for now, I mean, it is the Megas. The Megas did come out, so of course they are kind of taking the spotlight for this month. But yeah, just looking at this, it kind of shows how good this deck really is. Like, if you want a solid deck just climb for like in ranked, then this is a good investment. You're gonna have a lot of fun running Mega Blaziken EX, especially paired with Entei, just getting a bunch of cards. The last deck we'll be covering from this tournament is Suicuine Greninja. Not gonna go too in depth with this, but I just want to kind of look at it to see how it performs against the newer decks. So I mean, just, yeah, it's going to take a little glimpse because I'm pretty sure most of you guys already know how this plays out. Giratina, Oricorio, Suicuine, Greninja. Yeah, very straightforward. You want to leave with Suicuine Ex, just chip with Greninja. And then, yeah, just essentially just do that. You could also leave with Oricorio depending on if your opponent's running a bunch of EXs. Giratina as well, just either as a ticking time bomb in the active spot or in the bench, just like waiting to get out and then do 130 damage. Yeah, very straightforward. Not really going to talk much about the deck itself, but just looking at the matches. Okay. So, won several times. One against Blaziken. Nice. Which makes sense. I mean, looking at this, Greninja Cyrus combo is pretty huge. It can definitely mess up your opponent, especially if you just start like bullying their backline. So yeah, you kind of want to make sure that your opponent does not get Mega Blaziken EX out. If your opponent can't do that, then all they have really is Entei and type advantage. Like even if Suicune's not doing max damage, you're still getting type advantage, just slowly chipping that Entei EX. And depending on the circumstance, you can very much just sub in Greninja, doing 100 damage to that Entei. So 2-hit KOing, a lot of value overall. But looking at the losses we got against Sylveon Hydreigon. Okay. I feel like this deck is very straightforward. Just looking at the image. Interesting. Only using Darkness. So for this deck, you ideally want to basically use Sylveon EX as kind of like an extra Professor's Research, being able to draw Hydreigon. Also Mega Absols here, just kind of chilling, yeah. But I feel like this deck kind of prioritizes on Hydreigon, just attacking, doing 130, potentially 150 to 170 as well. So something to note. And this deck beat this deck. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, keep in mind, Hydreigon can do 150 damage, essentially one-shotting Suicune if you don't Giant Cape. So getting a lot of value right there. This deck also has Lily to support Hydreigon, because keep in mind, after using this card's ability, you're taking 30 damage. Very similar to Rampardos in a sense, but for Rampardos' case, I mean, that card takes 50 damage of recall after knocking out your opponent's Pokemon. But yeah, I can see how this deck won. I mean, even without red, you got Giovanni. 130 damage plus 10. 140, one-shotting Suicune EX, and it's ultimately up to RNG. I feel like it really does come out to RNG, because if this deck gets like a very good starting hand, then your opponent really can't compete, especially if they have Suicune EX in the active slot, which I feel like that's what happened right here. Also, don't sleep on Absol. Absol, yeah, after attacking, you can discard. I'm just gonna pull it up right here. Yeah, your opponent reveals their hand, choose a supporter card you find there, and discard it. That's the key word there, discard. So you're not putting it back to the deck, which is very similar to what Silver does. It's just gone, pretty much. Until they add supporter cards or even attack abilities that make it so that you can just start getting supporter cards from your discard pile, it's very hard to get these cards back. Looking at this deck, it has one Cyrus, could be a win condition. Very much so. So let's say like Mega Absol does attack, discards that Cyrus. Greninja is just, yeah, I mean, slightly less effective. It's still pretty good, but not as great without Cyrus. So yeah, that's very interesting. But regardless, made it to, what is it, top 3? So yeah, still relatively effective. We shall see again in the future metas to see how this pairing will keep up, but so far it does seem rather good. It lost against, the final loss was against Mega Absol and Darkrai. Might as well take a look at this. Looking at it, I literally made a deck showcase using a very similar deck, but slightly different. This guy is using 2 leaves instead of 1. Very interesting, which is amazing, especially against the Greninja Cyrus combo, of course. If your opponent tries to mess you up using Cyrus, you can just leaf. And this guy is using 2 leaves in this deck. So yeah, this is kind of hard countering. Also with Oricorio, 2 Oricorios doing type advantage against Suicune and Greninja EX. So yeah, very disruptive deck overall. 1 Mars, 1 red card. In my deck showcase, I used 2 red cards, but yeah, this is a very good, very effective combo nevertheless, as well as paired with, of course, Mega Absol. Overall, this is a very fun pairing. This pairing Mega Absol, Oricorio, and Darkrai Ex, it just, you're gonna feel nasty using it, because it is essentially like you're just messing up your opponent, like with Mars and red card and Mega Absol's attack ability, and to add on to that, you're chipping them with Darkrai EX, as well as just being a wall with Oricorio. So it's very toxic in that regard. Like there's a lot of cards here that just make your opponent's life a living hell. But at the same time, I mean, it's just so effective. And with that being said, I probably won't talk much about this deck, because there is a deck showcase. Again, I highly suggest checking it out. It's a video before this. I might as well put it in the description below if I remember. I suggest watching that because it shows how effective this deck really is. Like, there's a lot of ways to play it. You can either lead with Pichu and eventually sub into Oricorio, or you can just lead with Darkrai EX being a wall, or lead with Mega Absol. But again, keep in mind, Mega Absol is a Mega EX, so once this card is knocked out, you essentially lose the game. And yeah, overall, that was the Pocket Mads tournament. So to summarize, Mega Altaria takes the #1 spot. Second spot goes to Mega Absol, and of course third, clinging on to life, clinging on to relevancy, Suicuine Ex, Greninja. And yeah, next tournament we're going to be going over is the Frog EX Weekly Cup. Looking at first place, yeah, Mega Absol Dominance. All right, this is much more similar to the deck I was running. The only difference is that for my deck, I ran only one Cyrus and then 2 red cards, just to like further just mess up my opponent, make their life a living nightmare. But overall, again, as I stated earlier, just super effective. This the embodiment of darkness and it's being toxic. I feel like darkness has this kind of is notorious to just be super disruptive. Whether it comes to like it's like chipping your opponent with DOT, doing poison. It's mainly known for that, sure. But it's kind of pivoting nowadays to just disrupt your opponent's hand. So I mean, of course, we have cards like Dark Pendant that kind of, I'm just gonna pull it up right here. Not as popular. I mean, you can very much pair this with Dark Pendant, but this card is very similar to Mega Absol, slightly worse in my opinion, this Poketool right here. If you guys don't know this card, if the darkness Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, your opponent reveals a random card from their hand and shuffles it into their deck. So you're kind of disrupting your opponent, but at the same time, Mega Absol is a lot more effective because this Dark Pendant, it goes back to your opponent's deck, whereas of course, Mega Absol, it's just gone. It's gone, and I mean, I feel like there is probably a way to get that card back, but it's not really that likely. Like, if anything, it's very hard to do and very obscure to do so. I mean, I don't really know how to get supported cards from your discard pile, so an overall a nightmare to go up against. And again, as I stated earlier, Copycat, red card, plus Mega Absol, a monstrous combo. So let's say your opponent's using something like Suicuine Ex or like one of the legendary dogs to just get a bunch of cards. Let's say you're down to 1 card. Your last card is Copycat. Your opponent has like, what, 8 cards? You'd use Copycat. And if you guys don't know, Copycat, this is what it does. Shuffle your hand into your deck. Draw a card for each card in your opponent's hand. So you're getting 10 cards after using Copycat. And after drawing cards, let's say you get red card. Use red card. Since it's an item, you can just use it. Disrupting your opponent, putting them down to 3 cards. And if your opponent has supporter cards in their hand, look at your opponent's hand and discard a supporter card. So their next turn, they're going to be left at 3 cards. And again, you're getting a lot of value because you're doing red card and also potentially discarding a very win condition supporter card, such as Cyrus or even Sabrina or Mars. So getting a lot of value. And it just feels so satisfying. But again, it depends on you as a player. But when I used this deck, I felt very dirty. I was like, damn, dude. Because there's going to be a lot of times where like you'd be using this deck and it could be very fast paced, especially if you're leading with Mega Absol, just disrupting their hand. But it can be very slow, especially paired with if you're leading with Oricorio. Because keep in mind, this deck has 2 Oricorios. So that is notable because 2 Oricorios can be a perpetual wall in a sense. So let's say you have an Oricorio in your active, Oricorio in your bench. Having 2 Oricorios on the field counters Sabrina or Repel. So let's say your opponent has an EX in their active and they want to kind of remove Oricorio from your active. They try to Repel. Guess what? You have another Oricorio in your bench. They try to Sabrina, same thing. So yeah, it really depends on your setup. Like, so yeah, depending on the field layout, your opponent really can't do anything. Granted, Oricorio only does 50 damage, but given time, I mean, you could either tie or win the game. Just like using Oricorio, just leading with Oricorio, making so your opponent really can't do much. And on top of that, I mean, if you want, you could pair Oricorio with Darkrai Ex's ability. So essentially doing 70 damage. And eventually, depending on the game, the stage of the game, you could just sub into Darkrai Ex or even Mega Absol to kind of either nuke or like do effective damage against your opponent. There's a lot of things that you could do with this deck. And then looking at the matches, only lost twice, okay. Lost against another Mega Absol deck, kind of expected. Against Greninja Oricorio, which makes sense. Let's see. Is this a non-EX? This is non-EX Greninja. Okay. Yeah, this is non-EX Greninja. So I feel like this matchup right here, it's partially up to RNG. I feel like this guy might have gotten a better hand. There is Oricorio. This is kind of annoying because it doesn't say if this deck is running dual type. I'm assuming not. So Oricorio might just be essentially a wall. So yeah, this deck can essentially just bully your Absol, your Mega Absol EX. And then you try to retreat, you can try to leave. Guess what? They have 2 Cyruses just to bring him back and back. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's how this deck lost. Because yeah, I feel like the biggest liability for this deck is Mega Absol. Very effective. But again, since it's a Mega, especially as a basic, only having 170 HP, could be a huge liability, especially if your opponent does knock it out. Yeah, aside from that, as you can see, very effective. Just winning against another Suicuine Greninja deck. The last deck that we'll be going over is this deck from Filthy Paldis. Also, number 1, I don't know if I mentioned it, but SS Eisen was the one who won. Congrats to them. But yeah, the last deck we'll be going over is by Filthy Paldis. It is the Jolteon Ex Pikachu EX deck. So this is a deck right here. A lot of fun, very fast paced. However, it does require a bit of RNG, depending on your starting hand. Like, it really is up to your starting hand how effective this deck will become. What makes this deck kind of special is this Eevee right here. This Eevee, if you guys don't know, came out in this pack, evolutions are just always getting buffed. For some reason, Dina just loves Eevee in general. I mean, when it comes to basic cards, I think Eevee pretty much is like the most popular basic, constantly getting power crept at this point. But yeah, what makes this card amazing, if you guys don't know, is the ability Boosted Evolution. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, it can evolve during your first turn or the turn you play it. Your first turn, turn 1, you can just get out Jolteon Ex. And Jolteon Ex is getting a lot of value. Its ability right here is essentially a reverse Darkrai Ex, very similar to Darkrai Ex's ability. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, whenever your opponent attaches an energy from their energy zone to one of their Pokemon, do 20 damage to that Pokemon. In other words, this card has potential to counter Darktina. Because, yeah, if you think about Darktina, if you think about Giratina in general, Giratina gets passive energy with its ability. And each time you use the ability, this Jolteon is doing 20 damage. Yeah. And on top of that, if you're trying to feed Darkrai, let's say your opponent does feed their Darkrai. Darkrai EX is doing 20 damage to this Jolteon EX. And inversely, Jolteon EX is doing 20 damage to that Darkrai. And then pairing that combo with Cyrus, you can just do insane amount of damage. So yeah, to your Cyruses, of course, making it a nightmare for your opponent to build up their bench Pokemon, especially with decks such as Mega Gyarados. Again, kind of dead on arrival. It's kind of pretty unfortunate. I'll definitely make a deck showcase with that Mega, but yeah, dude, this the combination with like this, but overall that archetype is it's very hard to get out. Like this attacking with Mega Gyarados EX, especially going against this matchup. So Mega Gyarados versus this Jolteon EX, you're gonna have a tough time. For one thing, I mean Gyarados, for one thing, Magikarp only has 30 HP. After you feed that card 1 energy, it's gonna be down to 10 HP. So next turn you either have to heal, Giant Cape, or evolve in order to make sure that the Magikarp won't get knocked out. Given that, I mean your opponent, like yeah, looking at this, go against a Magikarp, you can just Cyrus and start beating up that innocent Magikarp. Also, we have May right here. You guys don't know, put 2 random Pokemon from your deck into your hand. For each Pokemon you put into your hand this way, choose a Pokemon to shuffle from your hand into your deck. Essentially the supportive version of a Pokemon communication. It really depends on the scenario, but yeah, a lot of potential. So for this deck, I talked a lot about Jolteon EX, like a lot more than I probably should have. But ideally for this deck, you want to lead with either Jolteon EX or even with the Zeraoras or Oricorio. And then towards the middle to late game, sub in Pikachu EX and nuke your opponent. So I feel like the worst scenario here is to have Pikachu EX your turn 1. This guy will attack your 4th turn if you build him up manually, which is not worth it. And to counteract that, this deck is running X speed, but overall fast-paced damage. I feel like this deck really does strive on having strong early game presence. And then of course, towards the middle to late game, sub in Pikachu EX and just win the game. Ideally for this deck, Pikachu EX as well as Cyrus are your kind of win conditions. So keep that in mind. And then looking at the matches, just take a quick look. So lost twice, tied 1 time against Mega Altaria paired with Altaria. Interesting. Let's just take a quick look in regards to this match. Altaria is pretty good to kind of deal with Oricorio, I guess. We also have Tyrogue. Interesting matchup. Also Chingling, this again to mess up your opponent, making so that you can't use item cards. And I mean, looking at this, I mean, there's a bit of item cards that could be good, that could be useful. Of course, Pokeball, Elemental Switch, X Speed. But damn, dude, they really went to turn 30 with this. That's insane. But nevertheless, yeah, it kind of shows how prominent Jolteon EX and Pikachu EX are, because this deck made it to number 7. So yeah, this tied. So yeah, they tied right here, and then they lost ultimately to Mega Altaria EX, which yeah, I meant kind of went over already. And yeah, that was the Frog EX Weekly Cup. Overall, very much expected. I mean, yeah, just huge prominence from a lot of Megas and EXs from this month, from this week. And I very much like how diverse it is, for now at least, because I mean, it seems somewhat skewed. Looking at this, I mean, just looking at this, there's a lot of Mega Absols, Mega Altarias, and then looking at the previous tournament as well. Yeah, you got Mega Altaria, Absol being the top performers. So we shall see how that shifts towards later in the meta. And to end this video off, we're going to be using this deck in PvP, and we'll see how it performs. All right, here we are in PvP battle. Not that bad. Okay, so might as well red card. This is an amazing combo with this deck, is the Copycat and red card combo. So yeah, you would Copycat, getting a lot of value, and then red card. And keep in mind, there's 2 red cards, so I can do it again later on towards the middle to late game. For now, I'm just gonna chill like this. This is a very goated setup right here. Now, Chingling right here, amazing baby Pokemon. Jingly Noise, only 10 damage. However, after attacking, yeah, my opponent can't play item cards, which is very good, especially against stage 2 Pokemon such as Blaziken, Mega Blaziken EX. So yeah, making it essentially harder for my opponent to evolve into that Mega Pokemon. So yeah, not that bad. At this point, I'm just gonna be super aggressive. Okay, that was... I'm gonna do one more battle. That was... okay. It kind of shows how menacing this deck can be, how much like you can just disrupt your opponent. Because if you just start out with Chingling, just messing up your opponent, and he can't use like Pokeballs or rare candies, then you're getting an insane lead, especially if you're building up your bench, trying to get Altaria out as fast as possible. But yeah, I'm gonna do one more battle. That was way too short. All right, last battle, going against another fire deck. Hopefully this will be more eventful, but Alright, yeah, going first is so nice with this deck, especially if you're leading with this baby. Again, just very aggressive. I really do like kind of the balance. Like, we have babies that are like super supportive. There are babies that are primarily energy supports, whereas there are babies that are just like this kind of like messing up your opponent, such as Chingling, making sure that they don't use their item cards. Hand could definitely be better, but we can definitely chill with this for now. Jingly Noise. Okay, all he does is end his turn. Nice. Professor's Research. 7 cards. I bet you at least one of them is item card. Like, at least one card in his hand. Like, that's actually huge. And at this point, look at this, man. Yeah. So very straightforward. Just do this. Next turn, I can just sub into Mega Altaria. And since this is a baby, I can just free retreat. One-shot this Entei, getting a huge lead. And then looking at his board, yeah, he has no Pokemon out. And if he does get a Pokemon out right now, like this guy, this poor innocent chicken, I have Sabrina. Oh, he tries to Sabrina as well. Oh, shit. Damn, that is rough. But we can definitely work with this. Okay, so we might be losing a... If I were him, I wouldn't one-shot his Jirachi. Because if he does, then, I mean, I can just sub in Altaria. Okay, maybe not, but this goes right for it. Okay. Sacrificing the Wish Pokemon. But it doesn't matter, because we have another Jirachi right here. Yeah, that was a... Yeah, we got his twin right here coming back. Just trying to say hi, and guess what, man? Mega Altaria could one-shot Entei, but no. I'm thinking about the long game right here. Torchic. I'm sorry, man. You're not... Blaziken is not getting out. I'm sorry. Kind of overkill, but next turn, no matter what, I can just Cyrus. And it should be GG. Unless this guy ends up, like, Marsing me. That could mess me up a little bit. But nevertheless, like, looking at my board, I have such a huge lead that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, look at that. He just used 2 Pokeballs. He had 2 Pokeballs in his hand, but because of Chingling, he couldn't really utilize them. So, yeah, that's... Damn. And at this point, there's really nothing, man. He has 2 energy onto this Entei, but that Entei can't do shite. Interesting. Last-ditch effort. Reds subs into other Entei. Flame Patches. Attacks. But I have Cyrus, man. He's always here. He's always here when you need him. I'd say probably like 80% of the time, at least for me, personally. And Chingling here to say hi. At this point, I can just feed a Sableye. Like, it doesn't really matter, because, yeah, that's... This is Mega Altaria in a nutshell. Like, your starting hand, if you go first, you're getting such a huge lead. As well as if you go second. I feel like second is also rather great. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, that's why I like this deck. Because, I mean, going first and second are just amazing. This deck thrives no matter what turn you play in. And yeah, that's pretty much the video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe. I usually upload these videos around Saturday, like usually Saturday or Sunday, but because this is a new series, and it's actually been kind of a while since I've done these, I wanted to do it as fast as possible, primarily like a week after this booster set came out. I feel like that was kind of proper. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace.